Hello and welcome to another brand new video here. Today, it's a fresh new video for you to check out right now.
We about to turn it on. We about to turn it on. We about to turn it on.
So first up, we're going to take off these two brackets here. So just pull them straight down. And then we can pull this entire unit right out from here. And then we can, here. There, and then take off the two screws, a long extension, and 16mm socket, and unscrew the shock absorber on top. So next up, you'll want to unscrew this bottom bolt on the shock absorber using a 21mm socket. And take the shock absorber out. So, and we have now removed the rear shock absorber completely. So next we take a special tool to compress the springs all the way down. Let's put the claw in here. So, when we have the old spring out, we set the new spring in place. We need to leave a gap here, or rather, the spring can only be 20mm deeper, or rather, adjust it by 20mm. That's the absolute minimum you can adjust. They'll put it back on. Take the rubber part now. So we set the spring in top to bottom, attaching everything at the bottom first. Now we're pressing the entire assembly downward and inserting the spring up at the top. So make sure that the spring is seated properly here at the bottom. Just like this rubber nipple here. Good. Now that we've got the shock absorber completely out of the vehicle, the next step is to remove this cap right here, then proceed to unscrew the nut, and finally take out the entire thrust bearing assembly. So we take a special nut for the shock absorber. It has this slot here, which fits on there perfectly. Especially for shock absorbers, we take a 16mm box wrench with a ratchet. And we unscrew this whole thing here. and take the strut mount out and replace the shock absorber. So we then put the strut mount onto the new shock absorber. Take the new nut and thread it on. And screw the whole thing tight. So we take a 5mm hex key with a large ratchet and a 17mm box end wrench and tighten everything down here. So then we reinstall the cap and can screw the shock absorber right back into its original position. So we put the new shock absorber back into place. And put the screws in place. It's a bit hard for you guys to see all this, but when you're doing it yourselves, you'll see it clearly. Or when you were unscrewing, you already saw that. So the two shock absorber screws get 50 Newton meters plus 45 degrees, but I find 50 Newton meters is plenty and tighten everything. So, and have tightened the whole thing down to 50 Newton meters. And the same now with the other screw. So afterwards, when we've screwed the shock absorber on top, we compress the springs a little bit, take the screw, put it in, and put the washer back on like so, and mount the whole thing once onto the problem we have with this screw, or rather, the specific issue that arises with this particular screw during installation. With this bushing, we can only properly tighten the screw when the full weight of the car is on the ground and it's sitting level, or rather, when the car is on the ground like this, and we tighten this bolt with 150 Newton meters and then an additional 180 degrees. This bolt has to be tightened according to the manufacturer's specifications, and it's supposed to be replaced. But I think 150 Newton meters is plenty for this. So we're just going to snug it up for now and then torque it down properly later on the alignment rack. So once we've got everything done on the rear axle, the first thing we can do at the front axle is unbolt the drive shaft. So now we can go ahead and start on that. Press it in. So we take an 18mm socket with an extension and unscrew the shock absorber bolt here. So, and we take an 18mm combination wrench and attach it to the back here. So, and we unscrew the whole thing. It has this specific offset design that's been made to let us get into those really tight spots where the bolt is practically unreachable with a standard tool, giving us the clearance we absolutely require for this job. Or rather, on one short side and the other long side, we'll place it here like this. All right, we've spread this apart. A 16mm open-end wrench and a 16mm ratcheting wrench. And unscrew the connecting rod here. So, unscrew the nut here, I'll unscrew this one here. Next, we'll use an 18mm socket and an 18mm wrench to remove the bottom shock absorber. We take a short extension. So, just to be safe, We're removing the level regulation sensor along with its lever because we have to lower the entire assembly so far down that we could potentially end up damaging the sensor. We're using both a 10mm open-end wrench along with a 10mm curved box end wrench to completely unscrew the entire assembly. So next, we're unscrewing the two handlebars right here. Of course, you could also unscrew it from the front, but very often this long bolt is completely seized up and stuck solid. That means I'm unscrewing these two bolts here, grabbing a 16mm open-end wrench and also a 16mm ratcheting open-end wrench, and I'm loosening the whole assembly. Okay, so once that first bolt is completely off, you just need to repeat the entire process on the other side. And then you have the whole thing loose here. So once you've unscrewed the two bolts, you can knock the handlebars down. So, and you pull the whole thing off a bit, be careful the drive shaft on the gearbox side doesn't pop down. So, and make sure the hoses aren't under any tension. So you can go ahead and remove the brake hose completely. So, and then all this other wiring here in the back, just take all of that off. So, and now you can push this whole assembly down far enough so that the shock absorber fork can be pulled out from its position. So, and without putting any strain on the brake hose or the other wiring. Just be careful with that. Or you can of course just disconnect the plugs. You can open them up of course. So, tie the whole thing down tight, so that the brake hose and the cables aren't strained. And then we next have to unscrew the top of the shock absorber and pull the whole thing out. So, next we unscrew this one plastic trim piece here. Or rather, we unscrew the plastic screw. Using a flathead screwdriver, and take the trim piece out here, once here on this side and once on the other side. To get access to the two bolts on that shock absorber, we need to unscrew this reservoir here. We take a 13mm socket, a medium extension, and a small ratchet, and we unscrew it. We unscrew this nut here. And remove the reservoir out. Okay, and unscrew these four bolts here. Okay, and make sure that with the last bolt at the bottom, it doesn't fall down. So here you'll first take the ground measurement from the coolant return line of the coolant reservoir. And unscrew these two here. And just hold the whole assembly from underneath here for a quick moment. So, and then you can just go ahead and carefully pull the entire assembly out from here completely. We set the entire assembly down on the wooden block and fastened it at the bottom here using a rope. So the whole assembly here isn't under any load. Then we take a spring tensioner, tension the spring, unscrew it, and then we install the new one in its place. Just tension it a bit so when we unscrew it, it doesn't completely fly apart. So, and unscrew. This whole thing off once. And put the new spring into place. Then we go ahead and set the thread once, making sure it's properly adjusted and securely in position. Now, for the front axle. The absolute minimum, what you can turn down, is 14.5. Now the distance measured from this point right here all the way over to the center point where you're going to install the screw into, meaning we set it to 14.5. And we can fasten it here using an Allen key. So after you've set the thread depth, we don't even need to tension the spring anymore at all, and we can simply go ahead and fit this part right here, putting the new screw on top of it. Pay attention that the spring, I'll show you in a moment when we flip the whole thing over. So afterwards, we grab a bent 9mm ring wrench along with a bent 19mm ring wrench, and proceed to firmly tighten the entire assembly right here in place. Let's put the whole thing back in. Okay, and then we'll go ahead and torque down the 4 screws to 40 Newton meters plus 90 degrees. I'll tighten the whole thing to 40 degrees first. So then put the container back in. Refit the coolant water, the return line, the hose, and properly reinsert the gasket. So we finished everything on top and will now assemble everything on the bottom. We're putting this one screw back in here. We're tightening the nuts back down here again, so that means we've finished everything on top. This is how the nuts are installed here. The bolts, or rather the nuts, you can only tighten them down completely and properly once the car is sitting on your street, or rather on a flat surface, because it's on jack stands here, and if you tighten them now when you lower the car, you could damage the bushings, which means just start to tighten them. Tighten them and lower the car, or use the jack to lift it up. And only then tighten them fully. The bolts get the nuts, or the bolt gets torqued to 40 Newton meters, plus an additional 90-degree turn. So that's the proper procedure you should follow. We'll tighten the whole assembly up. So afterward, when you've installed the 2 upper joints, you take the lower part of the shock absorber. I'll install this part down here first. So, and you slide it into the shock absorber. So now, take that same screw that was originally for the bottom of the shock absorber, and you just slide the whole assembly right back into place here. So take the washer. So, and screw in the screw for the shock absorber from underneath. Tighten it to 90 Newton meters and 90 degrees, like that. Let's pump this up once. So we can screw the shock absorber on top securely right away. And this bolt and the ones up top, you'll want to make sure you tighten everything down really securely and firmly so that the entire vehicle is sitting completely and solely. on its own weight without any kind of external support or assistance whatsoever for you. And once we've pushed the whole thing up, we have to make sure that this is seated all the way in here. And then we can take the tool out. So then we'll go ahead and tighten this screw back up again, nice and tight, and then we'll screw it right back in here. And this shock absorber bolt gets 40 Newton meters plus 180 degrees. And now we'll tighten this all up here. Connecting rod to the sensor back on. Then we'll secure the connecting rod, tightening this whole assembly right here down. Now we just finish up by tightening everything down completely, and that's all there is to it for this part. Then we proceed to tighten the center screw back onto the drive shaft, making sure it's secured firmly in its proper position. That one gets 200 Newton meters, plus an additional 180-degree turn. And then don't forget to put the cover back on afterward. Tighten down this entire assembly right here, making certain that all components are completely secure and properly fastened in place. Just like you did on the other side, carefully following that exact same procedure and sequence for consistency. I didn't actually film the removal and attachment process, but I think since you're already working on it, you'll be able to see how it's done. The whole procedure, you know? If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and see you next time. Ciao!